Okay. I think it's important that we become comfortable with being alone. Because when we aren't comfortable with being alone and when our own company isn't enough, we'll always look for distractions, emotional dependencies, external validation from other people, negative lifestyle and negative vices, just anything to fill the void. And, you know, it's much more beneficial to face the void head on. If you're not comfortable being alone and you're not comfortable just being alone and reflecting and being in your own company, if you're not comfortable with that, it's obviously because when you are in that situation and when there's no one else around and when you get that mental clarity and your thoughts and your feelings are heightened and you're extra aware of them, it's obvious that you're not comfortable with those thoughts and you're not comfortable with those feelings you're having. So instead of facing them head on and embracing the solitude and having more of it and reflecting and being alone and facing them head on, you try to distract, you try to deflect and avoid that situation. Whereas, sorry in my eye, it's much more beneficial to face it head on, understand it, and then change it. So if you're fat and out of shape, and when you're alone and when you're just reflecting, you know you're fat and you know you're out of shape and you don't like that. But instead of embracing that situation of solitude and being alone and reflecting, instead of embracing that and facing it head on, you just distract and deflect and you just carry on this bad lifestyle, you carry on this negative, unhealthy lifestyle, and you drink and you just try and organise something for the weekend, you just, order some food, do things like that to distract from these feelings. That's much more negative and that's not solving anything compared to just facing them head on. And a lot of good comes from solitude. That's where your creativity comes from sitting alone and reflecting and thinking about things. That's where the creativity comes from. That's where, if you're having these negative feelings about yourself, you can understand why you're having them. You can understand if they are justified, if it does seem like reality and what's actually real. And then when you understand why you're having them and you understand what the actual issue is, that's when you can change it. When you have that clarity of mind and you understand and you become aware of where these negative feelings are coming from, that's the state we need to be in to change it, to affect the root cause of these negative feelings. Instead of always trying to avoid the alone time and always trying to avoid the solitude and the time to sit alone and reflect with no distractions, instead of trying to avoid that, become comfortable with it. Become comfortable with sitting alone, no one else around, just you, no distractions, and understand these thoughts and understand who you are. Understand the version of yourself that exists right now. So when you can sit alone and reflect, that's when you get to the bottom of these things. That's when you can make real change to the things you're not happy with. So this emotional dependency thing as well. If you're still watching to this point as well, what you're going to realise is I repeat myself a lot of the time and I have so many things in my mind that I want to say, that I think about before even making the video, and it can all just get jumbled up when I'm talking and then I don't know what to say next. But this emotional dependency thing, I can remember 4 years ago being so emotionally dependent on others. I can't remember when I would actually spend time alone. And that's not that was just because I was uncomfortable being alone. Because when I was alone, all I would have is just negative feelings about myself. I would hate the way I looked. I would just hate the version of me that existed at that time. I wasn't really training. I was just getting into like the idea of, lifting weights and training and doing this type of thing. I was just getting into the idea of it. So even if I was doing it, it was like once a week and, not really serious. But I was in a relationship, I was really active with my friends at that time. So I would always have someone there. I would always have my partner at the time there. I would always have a friend there. I would always be in constant communication with these other people who were close to me. So if I was ever alone, it would just be like, let me just speak to this person. Let me just text this person. I was never actually just alone and not texting anyone, not talking to anyone in a call, not with anyone. I was never actually just alone. And that was just because I had negative feelings about myself. I didn't like the way I looked. I was insecure. I didn't like the version of myself that existed. So instead of facing it head on, I would rather deflect it and distract it with emotional dependencies. And when I did just embrace it and accept it and have that alone time to reflect about myself, that's when I started to make change. That's when I started to train more and get more into this idea of training, change my appearance, live a more healthy lifestyle, eating cleaner, drinking more water. With solitude, clarity comes with silence, and clarity comes with solitude. Clarity comes when we sit alone and reflect. And I think it's good to have clarity and awareness with our thoughts and with our feelings, because then we can attack the feeling, we can change the feeling, we can get to the root cause of the feeling and change it and get rid of that negative feeling. Build that direction, build that identity of who you want to be in the future, the vision of yourself you would love to be in the future. Build that, and the way to build that is to have that mental clarity, to think clearly. Because, most growth habits, the habits that make us grow, they demand focused repetition. Now, we can't give focused repetition to anything if we're not thinking clearly. So it's important to become comfortable with solitude for two reasons. One, because we're not always going to have these people around. So why have such a desperate and large emotional dependency on these people if they're not always going to be around, if the likelihood at some point is they're going to go away? You've got to be rooted in yourself, not in someone else, not in the presence of someone else. So for that reason, and also because our thoughts and our feelings become clearer, and the things we don't like about ourselves, we can then face them head on and change them. We build this direction and this identity of who we want to be in the future through mental clarity, and the mental clarity comes from solitude. So embrace the solitude, become comfortable with being alone and just reflecting. And when you do have those reflection periods and you are alone and you understand your thoughts and your feelings, you can then build direction, build identity, understand clearly who you want to be in the future. And when you understand clearly who you want to be in the future, the actions you must undertake become so clear. So that's why we need to find comfort in solitude. For clarity, to build direction, build identity, and to limit emotional dependencies. So don't distract yourself, don't deflect these feelings you're having, embrace them and find comfort in solitude.